We're now going to have a brief look at reinforcement in general with a quick overview. Now you'll notice I'm in the floor plan 000 ground floor here. I've placed a new structural slab in there for you, which is actually 300 millimeters deep. It's aligned with the other two slabs here that already have reinforcement. Now, because obviously path and fabric follow a similar process when you place them in your Revit structure model, I'm just going to place some area reinforcement. And then what we'll do is we'll have a look at some rebar reinforcement as well. So I'll click on area as before. And what we've got to do is set our areas by way of picking lines. So I'm going to pick lines. I'm going to set the offset to 50 millimeters again. And I'm going to make sure it's locked, which it already is anyway. It's remembered that from last time. So what I'm placing now is the rebar line. So what I've got to do is go to my slab and zoom in. So I need to zoom in now, and you'll notice once I'm in that mode, I can't zoom in or out until I click once in the drawing area. Remember to do that click. Don't be phased by that. You click in the drawing area and you can zoom in and out. So I now need to select the lines on the edges of the slab. So I zoom in, and as you can see, look, I can just touch there. It'll tell you what the slab is when you move over it with the pointer. So I click there, and that's selected part of the slab. So if I come in here, again, click there, it's a slab edge. You can see that. So as I come in here, just make sure that you get the right line each time. So as you zoom in and zoom out, make sure you get those slab edges. It's very important. So as I come here like that, again, like that, that's okay because it's lining up with the edge of the other structural area. So that's not a problem. Make sure you don't get the grid line in error. And you can see there, that's lining up as well. So that's the edge of the slab there. So if I zoom out a bit now, I've got those two edges done. That edge there, nice and easy, very easy to find. And if I zoom in here now, I want to get the slab edge again. You might possibly get structural foundation on the retaining wall, because that is also there. So you might need to move along a little bit. There's the foundation slab there, like so. The trick there would be, I would actually just take this line along horizontally. Because the good thing about the Revit tools is as I pan across now, if I zoom in a bit, I can click on the end of that line there, and as I drag, the drawing tools allow me to snap to that endpoint. So that's now a closed loop ready for my area reinforcement. Obviously I can change the settings here in the properties palette. I'm not going to at the moment. So that's all set up. If I click on the green tick, lines cannot intersect each other. So again, we've got that issue like we had previously. So we just continue, or we can show where they are. So if I close that now, just close that error, it's showing me in orange where the lines are intersecting. So it's that line and that line. So I continue, and I zoom in, and there's our little intersection. Very easy. I select that line first. Now I'm still in pick line again. So you will make this error over and over again. I still do it, as you can see. So what you do is you go to line, or you just hit escape just to make sure that you've got the pointer and you've got modify selected here at the end of the ribbon. That line there I don't actually need. It's these two lines here that I need to update. So again, click on the little drag line button, line it in that way, hit escape, click on this line, drag again. That now lines in nice and neatly. If I zoom out now, that should work fine because I've sorted out that intersection. But you cannot have intersections. It's got to be a closed loop. Click on the tick. Lines must be in closed loops. The highlighted lines are open on one end. So you'll notice here, we've got an issue there on that dot. So we continue, and we zoom in, and there you go. Revit spots all the little errors for you, not a problem. So we make sure we're in the modify with the little arrow there, and all we do is we click, zoom in a little bit closer there, get that line end there, drag it across so it lines in with that one, like that. Then when I click on the tick, that'll place the reinforcement for me. If I zoom out now, my rebar has now been placed. So I can hit escape to deselect, and I've now got a reinforced concrete floor foundation slab. Now if I hover over that, you can see there's the reinforcement in both directions, and you can see there it's done the whole slab for me. Okay, so that's our ground floor slab done. Let's have a look at placing some rebar as well. I'm going to come down the project browser, and I'm actually going to find a section that I need called isolated footing. It's a wall section, and it's here. And I'm going to place some rebar in there, in that little isolated footing there. So what I do, I go to Structure, reinforcement and rebar. The rebar browser comes up and I've got that lovely U-shape. So I want to place some U-shaped reinforcement in there. So I'll zoom in, just pan a little bit so I can see the isolated footing, come in there, and I can flip which way I want the reinforcement to go. It normally goes that way round. Click there. My reinforcement is now in place. I can now sketch it if I want to, lay out minimum clear spacing in there like so. So that's done. My rebar is now in place. Hit escape. There's the rebar placed nice and neatly in that footing. So if I now go to my 3D view and I zoom out a little bit and just pan across a little bit and zoom in, there should be some rebar somewhere in one of those footings. Now at the moment I'm using consistent colours. If I go to wireframe, you should be able to see it's just under there actually, right in there. So you can't actually see that reinforcement very well because there's loads of reinforcement already in place. But the idea being is that that reinforcement is now placed in your footing and you can see it. In fact, I've just missed it. It's there. If we zoom in, there it is right there. It's inside that reinforcement pad footing there. So what we need to do is just really zoom in when you're using that 3D view because you can miss it. It's very easy to miss. So there's our reinforcement that we've just placed inside our little isolated footing there. So that's a brief overview of placing some area reinforcement and some rebar reinforcement in a concrete slab and an isolated pad footing. We're now in a new section of this course on Revit structure, and what we're going to look at now is beams and framing. As usual, in your working files there will be a new Revit project. There's the name of it at the top of the screen there. So it's Revit structure, beams and framing.rvt. Obviously you'll also have, as you can see there, your CAD linked file as well, which will be a DWG, an AutoCAD DWG file. Okay, I'm in the project browser in the Revit project at the moment, and we're going to look at placing beams. Now, there are no beams on our ground floor. If I go and look at the structural plans here, ground floor shows things like our slabs, our retaining walls, our footings, and so on. I want you to make sure that you're using the structural plan 001 first floor in the Revit project. Don't start placing your beams on the ground floor because they'll start clashing with the ground slabs and the floor slabs. Now, there's a lot of information in this first floor structural plan at the moment. There's a lot of things on the screen. What I would suggest that you do is use your hide tools to hide the things that you don't need to see. So the first thing I would do there is go into your structural plan in the properties here, in the properties palette, because what we did previously was we set an underlay of 000 ground floor. So let's change that. And what we can do there, we can say none. So we'll change that to none and apply it. That automatically loses any ground floor information like slabs, but you'll notice also the CAD linked drawing disappears as well. That's because it's linked at ground floor level for when we use the 3D view. We can switch it back on later if we want to, but in the first floor level, it's always good just to have your grids, your walls, and if we zoom in, obviously any existing columns and beams that are there. Now you'll notice there are already some existing beams. There's one there, for example, and they look quite bold. That's because we've got this setting here set to coarse. If I set that to medium, they'll update and you can actually see them as beams. And that's actually quite good when you're placing beams. The reason being, look, you can see some of these beams and columns and things clash quite a little bit. So we've got to make sure that they join properly as we work through this particular part of the course. Now you might see some weird stuff like this. That's because they are slanted beams. Remember, we placed some slanted beams in one of the previous sections in the course. So what you're seeing there is the section of the beam as it goes up and slants across that beam from first floor level. So you're seeing the start of it and then it will go up to second floor level. Okay, so let's have a look at placing some beams now. We're going to move over to this part of the building here where there aren't any. So let's have a look there. We've got some UCs, some universal columns there. I want to place a beam in there, just a single beam on its own. So I go to the Structure tab and I select Beam here. And as soon as I do that, obviously Revit goes, oh, you want to place a beam. So you've got lots of options now. You can pick a line to place a beam against, you can draw it and so on. You can place it on the grids and you can also tag it upon placement. So if I select Tag like that, that'll go blue. And then what I want to do is place my beam But before I place it, you need to check which beam you want to use. So in the properties palette, click on the flyout, and we've got various beams there. I'm going to go for a 305-127 beam there. And if I zoom in now, I can actually snap to the end of that column there, drag my beam down, come to here, like so, and I need to snap to that column there. Now what I needed to check there was what level that beam was going in at. So if I hit escape once, I can check where it's going in. So let's have a look and make sure. Reference level first floor, and just make sure that it's going into the right place. So what we'll do, we'll go back in again, and I'll click, and I'll drag, and I'll line in there and click again. And there's my beam. Now, because I had tag on placement switched on, obviously it's tagged it, and you will get a lot of text. The good thing is, if I hit escape now, just to cancel the place beam command, if I select that tag, if I select it, right click, I can use hide in view an element. So that will hide that. When I switch on reveal hidden elements again, I can click on it, right click, unhide in view elements to bring it back, and then switch off the hidden elements like we do with everything else. So these tags can be switched on and off when needed. Let me just zoom out a little bit now, and I'm going to use this grid line here. I'm going to place beams on that grid line there. Now we've already got a beam there, so I'm going to actually delete that one, like so, because I'm going to place them all the way along that grid. So let's have a look at that and see how that works. So I go back to beam, up at the top here in the structure tab. Now you'll notice as well in the options bar there's a lot of settings. So at the moment my structural usage is automatic. I'm going to change that to primary beams, as in load bearing beams. So they're primary beams. I'm going to stick with the 305-127-37 there, and I'm going to go on grids like so, and I'm still tagging on placement, and I select that grid line there like that, and it places them at every intersection for me. So when I click on finish like so, it's worked out that there's obviously columns there. I'll just hit escape one more time because it's trying to place beams again, but it's placed those beams at every intersection where there is a column intersecting a grid line. That is normally the quickest way of placing beams, because then you can just go and select a beam at any time. If you want to change the size of it, you go into your properties here in the properties palette and just update it. So if you've got 10 or 15 beams that are all the same and there's only one sort of different beam in that list of beams that you're placing, do it that way and then just go in and edit the one beam that needs to be changed. It's much, much easier. Now, if we click on the annotation of the beams, you can actually edit that as well. You can move it, you can copy it, and so on. Now, don't forget as well, you've got the annotate tab on the ribbon. If I go to annotate here, I can actually go and tag things if I want to. I can place keynotes. So if I tag by category, like so, I can go and tag a beam. Let me show you what I mean. I'll just hit escape there. I'll delete that tag there, like so. That's gone. But if I go tag by category and then select that beam, I can tag it. Now the tagging is obviously different because it's using a different setting. Can you see here? Leader, attached end, 12.7 millimeters and so on. So if I undo the leader there, like so, I don't want a leader there, and I hit escape, it does that. It automatically places that leader. I can undo that and then make sure that the leader is unticked. I want it horizontal or vertical, and I can also specify distance if I've got a leader as well, which I haven't. So if I select that now, you'll see the tag comes in without a leader. So I'll just hit escape there. I can also tag all. Now, if I do a tag all, I can go and select objects in the current view that aren't already tagged. So I can go and pick those. There's lots of different tags. They are families in the Revit itself. So you can go and pick a tag, such as structural framing or fabric sheets and so on. And then you can go and tag the things that aren't already tagged. And you can tell Revit to tag everything if you wish. You can switch on the leaders, the leader lengths, and so on. I'm not going to do that in this case, but that is how you would do it if you had lots of things that needed tagging that aren't already tagged in your Revit model. So that's how you place beams in Revistructure. Most of the time in Revistructure, you will be placing your beams individually, and you'll be placing them like we did here with our 305s, or you'll be placing them along grids like we did there with the 305s as well. Sometimes, though, you will need to place what they call beam framing systems. Now, normally what happens with a beam framing system is it will span across grids. So, for example, here, you've got a beam there, you've got a beam there, but you might insert beams across this span here. Now, let's have a look at that now. What exactly have we got in place here in the first floor? Well, the first thing we have here is we have a stairwell. So there wouldn't actually be a beam there. It would actually clash with the staircase that's coming up through that vertical penetration in the building. So let's delete that one there. Okay, here though, you might have a beam framing system. Now, just to make things a bit easier, what I'm going to do there is I'm going to right click on there, hide in view. I think I'll do category there just to hide those for the moment. And also there's a section line there that might get in the way as well. So I'll right click on that, hide in view, and also do category as well. So if I zoom out now, you'll see that all of those have gone. All we've got, quite literally, is our grids, our walls, and our beams and our columns. You can bring those back later. They're all in here, in your hidden elements, so you can find them later if you need to. Let's zoom in again now on the staircase and some of these beams here. Now, obviously, you've got the annotation. I'm not going to remove that. I'm going to leave that there for the moment. But when you want to place a beam framing system, you go to the Structure tab on the ribbon and you go Beam System here. So I click there, come into the drawing area, and you'll get a little stop sign until you select a beam and highlight it. Can you see that? I'm highlighting that particular beam there, which is a 305127. Can you see the vertical dashed lines? Because I'm hovering over that beam, it's placing a new beam framing system. Now, because I've selected beam system, notice there's a lot of things in the options bar that I can put in there. It doesn't have to be a 305. I can actually select something smaller because it is only bracing going across a span. So I might select a smaller UB, a 102 maybe, like so. Justification is center. I can change that if I want to beginning, end, or direction line. I'm going to leave it at center for the moment, just purely because it's easy to see when the beams get placed. Layout rule, fixed distance, or you might just go for maximum spacing, like so. And when I hover there now, can you see it's maximum spacing? It divides that span into 3 by placing 2 more beams in the framing system. Now, I'm just going to click there now, and as soon as I click, there's my framing system in place. It joins those smaller beams to the bigger beams like so. Now, I didn't actually tag those on placement purely from the viewpoint that you'll end up with loads of annotation all over your framing system and you won't be able to see it. So I'm happy with that. Now, what I could do as well, though, is I don't have to have an automatic beam system. That's parametric and dynamic, so it places it all for me. I can just go and sketch my beam system. And notice you've got the draw tools, all the line, pick lines, pick supports, and so on and so forth, and also the beam direction. So I could go and place a beam system in here and just draw where I want it to go. So if I zoom in now and pan a little bit, I can actually place, using lines perhaps, where I want that to go. So I can go from there to there. If I go to the intersections here of these, make sure right click, snap overrides, utilize those so that you get your intersections exactly where they should be. And then what we'll also do again, we'll come in here, we should get a point there, there we go. And I'll take it up to that end point there. So there's my beam system in place. Notice it's all pink. There's no orange clashes there. So I should be able to click now on that tick box there, and it places my beam system. Now notice it's placed it in line with this beam here, because that's the longer span. And notice it's annotated it all for me, and I can modify this at any time, but we'll look at that in one of the next videos in this section. So that's how you place a beam system, both manually and automatically. We're staying in our beams and framing Revit structure project, but what you'll notice is I've added a few extra beams in our 001 first floor plan. So you've got some more framing systems here. There's one there going across that span there. There's one there, and I've added another framing system there. Now you'll notice when you hover over a framing system, it highlights the whole thing, all the beams and the outline of the beam system. You can obviously break that by resetting that system. So if I click on that there now, you can see, look, there's a little symbol there saying it's all locked together. You can actually remove the beam system. So it's a bit like the structural reinforcement where you can remove the system and make that into individual beams if you wish. I'm not going to do that. because I want those beam systems to stay where they are. So I'll just hit escape there to deselect those. Now, what I've done is I've placed a beam here vertically on that grid line. And if we zoom in on that 305127, can you see there? I've placed it on the grids, but it hasn't actually tallied that beam up there with the column that is sitting there. So I actually need to edit that. I need to zoom in and modify that. And the best way to do this is click on the actual framing component end. See the dot there? Click and drag. And I'll just drag that vertically down the grid line and release. Now at the moment, it's not actually touching that column. But if I drag this upwards and just get it as near as I can, like that, and release, it will automatically join it to that column. Can you see that? So it says 0 there. It does show a little gap. That's purely for visual clarity, and it's in the Revit settings. I'll just hit escape now, and you can see that's joined neatly. And if I select, for example, that there, you can see there's that little gap there as well. And you can do this with any beam and any column. So if I zoom in here, that beam there, if I click there and just drag it to a point there, can you see when I get to that end there, I can release and it updates. You can just see the 0 there. If I zoom in real close, 0.0 millimeters. So it is actually joined, but it allows for visual clarity at the joints so that you can distinguish beams and columns. So that's modifying an actual physical beam. What about actually modifying the size of a beam? You might want a deeper beam there, for example. So if I zoom in and just pan, make sure I've got that beam central. There we go, like that. And I click there. That's a 305 by 127 by 37 universal beam. I can go to my properties palette, and I might want that to be, let's say, a 457 by 152. I just select it. It updates automatically. If I hit escape now, you'll see that all the joins have all tidied up automatically as well. I don't have to think about that. Now, we haven't actually looked at joining beams to columns, as in the actual physical joints, the connections as they're called, where they're either bolted or welded and so on. We will look at that later, but at the moment, what you do, as you can see, is use the Revit tools to modify where they join together, where they're attached, so to speak, but also their physical properties. You can edit those in the properties palette itself. Now, if I go and select that beam one more time, you'll notice there's nothing in the options bar. There's nothing there to edit in the options bar in this case. But you'll notice when I do place beams and beam framing systems, I have got all those options in the options bar when I'm placing the beams, not when I'm editing the beams. So that's how you modify your beams and your beam framing systems in Revitstructure. Let's have a look now at how we create sloping beams. Now, it may be when you're creating sloping beams, they go from one level to another. So you may need to copy beams from this level, which is our 001 first floor here in the project browser, up to maybe our second floor, for example. Now, I'm only going to do this with one beam, but if I select that beam there, like that, and then you'll notice we get Modify Structural Framing on the ribbon. Now, what I might want to do here is copy this to the clipboard. Now, you'll notice it's here. I've got Copy to Clipboard there, like so. As soon as I copy to clipboard, obviously I've got the paste option here. So if I click there, I can align to my selected levels. Now, I've only got the one beam at the moment. So if I align there and say I want that to align to the second floor, and I OK that now, that will actually place that beam on the second floor level. So if I go to second floor now, there's my beam there. Now, there aren't any other beams apart from those sloping ones, which are in another part of the actual Revit model itself. So you can bring all of your beams through the levels. You don't have to draw them for every single level. So at the moment, I'm working in the first floor, and I could actually copy and align this entire beam and framing system all the way up through all of the levels in my building as I work through each level and work upwards through my building. So let's have a look at these sloping beams now. You can slope your beams by changing the offset. So I'll select this beam again, this one here, like so. Now you'll notice there are some 0s in place. I can change the offsets here if I want to. Now they're all set at 0, so that's a level beam, and also the 0 when I drag the ends of the beam there is at 0 as well. However, I've got the beam here, so I've got start level offset, end level offset. So I'm going to change that there to 50 millimeters there, and I'm going to change the other one, the end level offset, to 100, like that, and I'll apply those now. Now, when I come out of here now and pan across, can you see the 50 and the 100 have updated? I've got the 0 offset off the grid, which is what you normally see when you line these beams up. But notice there was also 0 zeros this way, 100 and also 50 there. Now, I'm just going to hit escape to deselect that beam at the moment. I'm going to go down into our 3D view. Notice the views are building up in the project browser. Now, it's this beam here that we've been working on. Now, if I zoom in real close, can you see the offset there? Look, there's the offset, that end. There's the 100. And if I zoom in even closer, there's the 50 offset there. So if I select that beam, you can see the 50 offset at that end. If I pan across, there's the 100 offset there. Now, if I change these back to 0 and press enter there, that'll update that way. And notice if I change this one, change that back to 0 as well, that'll update that way. Notice as soon as I do that, can you see the standard gaps go back in where the beam is now level with the column and joining with the column again. So that's those offsets, and that's how you create your sloping beams. You can just basically offset each end and create a slope based on the connection to the column within your Revit structure.